I always thought growing old would be gentler than this. When I was younger, I pictured my later years filled with warm family dinners, laughter echoing through the house, my children sitting around my table, and my grandchildren running across the yard. I thought my old age would feel like a soft landing after a long and difficult journey. But life doesn't always give you what you expect. I live alone now. My husband passed away nearly 15 years ago, and the house has been quieter ever since. The ticking of the clock has become my companion. The creak of the wooden floorboards when I get up at night feels louder than ever. I kept this house because it held so many memories. Every room has a story. The kitchen is where I taught my children to bake bread. The living room is where we decorated the Christmas tree every year. And the porch is where we used to sit and watch the sunset together. But as the years went on, I started to notice how rarely my children visited. At first, I told myself they were just busy with work, with their families, with life. I made excuses for them, because that's what mothers do. We forgive. We understand. I used to call them every Sunday. At first, they answered with excitement, told me about their week, asked how I was feeling. But then the calls grew shorter. Sometimes they didn't answer at all, and I would sit with the phone in my lap, staring at the wall, telling myself they must have been too tired or too distracted. Still, I loved them. Every single day. Which is why what happened that night broke me in a way I can barely put into words. It was a chilly evening. I had invited my 2 children, David and Emily, over for dinner. I had been cooking all day, slow braising the meat just the way they liked, setting the table with the good china, polishing the silverware. When they arrived, I greeted them with a smile. I hugged them both tightly, breathing in the scent of their perfume and cologne, holding on just a second longer than they probably wanted. Dinner started off pleasantly enough. We talked about the weather, about Emily's new job, about David's children. But I could sense something was off. There was a heaviness in the air, a strange tension. At one point, I excused myself to the kitchen to get dessert. That's when I heard it. Their voices. They were talking quietly, thinking I couldn't hear. I don't know why I paused at the kitchen doorway, but something in their tone made my heart stop. Emily sighed and said, "How long do you think she's got left?" David chuckled softly and replied, "I don't know. A year. Maybe 2, if we're unlucky. But hey, we could make a bet out of it." And then I heard them laughing. Laughing? Like it was some sort of game. Like the number of days I had left to live was entertainment for them. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My ears started ringing, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. I wanted to believe I misheard them. I wanted to think it was a cruel joke, some sort of misunderstanding. But then Emily said, "Well, the sooner she goes, the sooner we can finally sell this house and split the money. I mean, come on, look at this place. It's a gold mine just sitting here. I'm tired of waiting." And that was when my heart broke. Not just cracked, broke. Shattered into pieces. I had spent my entire life loving them, sacrificing for them, putting them first. I had gone without new clothes, so they could have better ones. I had stayed up late, working 2 jobs so they could go to college. I had prayed for them every single night. And now, here they were, my flesh and blood, sitting in my living room, laughing about how long I had left to live and talking about how my death would make their lives easier. I didn't make a sound. I stood there in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face silently, listening to every single word. By the time I returned to the table, I had wiped my face and forced a smile, pretending nothing was wrong. I served dessert as though my entire world hadn't just collapsed. But inside, something in me had changed forever. That was the night I stopped being the naive mother who believed her children could do no wrong. That was the night I realized they didn't see me as their mother anymore. They saw me as an obstacle. And that was the night I decided that, when I left this world, I wouldn't leave them what they were expecting. No, I would leave them something that would haunt them far longer than my death ever could. That night, after my children left, I sat in my favorite armchair by the window and stared into the darkness for a long time. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like something precious had been taken from me. I replayed their words over and over in my head. How long do you think she's got left? The sooner she goes, the sooner we can sell this house. It was like poison, spreading through my heart. But here's the thing about being a mother. We are far stronger than anyone gives us credit for. At first, I cried. I cried until my chest ached and my eyes burned. But when the tears finally stopped, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't going to beg for their love. I wasn't going to plead for their respect. No, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had done to me. And I was going to do it in a way they would never forget. The very next morning, I called my lawyer. Mr. Peterson had been my attorney. For years he had handled everything from my husband's estate to my property taxes. When I told him I needed to make some changes to my will, he didn't ask why. He just told me to come in. I dressed carefully that day, my best Sunday dress. My hair pinned up neatly, a touch of lipstick. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who wasn't broken anymore. I saw a woman with a plan. When I arrived at Mr. Peterson's office, I sat across from him and said, I need to change everything. And I mean everything. He raised an eyebrow, surprised, but nodded. All right, tell me what you have in mind. I told him I wanted my children cut out of my will completely. Every penny, every asset, every heirloom, I wanted it all to go somewhere else. But not just anywhere. I wanted my estate to go to people and causes that would truly appreciate it. I set up a scholarship fund for young girls in my community who wanted to go to college. I left a large portion to the local church, where I had volunteered for years. I even wrote in a special clause to leave my beloved house to the family who lived down the street, a young couple with 3 kids who were always struggling to make ends meet. The look on Mr. Peterson's face when I explained this was priceless. You're sure about this? He asked. Oh, I'm sure, I said with a small smile. And then I added one last touch, a letter. I dictated it carefully, word by word. It wasn't an angry letter, but it was powerful. I wanted my children to read it after I was gone and feel the weight of what they had done. In that letter, I told them I heard every word that night. I told them that the moment they laughed about my death, they lost the right to my legacy. And I ended it with one simple line. You bet on how long I had left, but you never bet on me taking control of my own ending. Once everything was finalized, I started to behave differently. I invited my children over more often, smiling at them sweetly, cooking them their favorite meals, listening to them talk about their lives as if nothing had happened. But I also started dropping subtle hints, just enough to make them nervous. Oh, I've been getting my papers in order lately, I'd say casually while pouring tea. Or, I've been thinking about what will happen to this house when I'm gone. Each time, I watched their faces carefully. Emily would glance at David. David would clear his throat awkwardly. They didn't know what to say. Sometimes I would laugh to myself late at night, imagining the shock on their faces when the truth finally came out. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reminding them that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't just waiting to die quietly while they circled like vultures. I still loved them, a part of me always would, but they needed to learn a lesson. And I was going to make sure they learned it the hard way. After I changed my will, I didn't feel angry anymore, I felt calm. For the first time in months, I was sleeping through the night. I'd sit on my porch in the mornings, sipping coffee, and watch the sunrise without feeling that heavy knot in my chest. But I wasn't done. Changing my will had been the first step. Now, I wanted my children to feel the weight of what they had done, not just when I was gone, but while I was still here. The next time they came over, I acted cheerful, maybe even too cheerful. "David," I said when my son walked in, hugging him tight. "Emily, oh, I'm so glad you could make it. I made your favorite pot roast." They smiled, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were expecting me to be quiet, bitter, maybe distant. Instead, I was practically glowing. Over dinner, I casually mentioned, "You know, I've been going through some old papers, getting things in order." David froze, mid-bite. Emily glanced at him quickly, then forced a smile. "Oh, what kind of papers?" "Oh, just boring things," I said with a small laugh. "Wills, bank accounts, that sort of thing. It feels good to be organized." I watched as David's fork hovered in the air. He tried to act casual, but I could see his jaw tighten. "Mom, you don't have to worry about all that right now," he said. "Oh, but I do," I replied softly. "You never know when your time will come. Best to be prepared, don't you think?" The room went quiet for a moment. Then Emily quickly changed the subject, asking about my garden. But I could feel the tension in the air. That became my game. Every time they visited, I'd drop a hint just enough to make them wonder. "Oh, I was at the bank yesterday, signing some papers. Funny thing, I saw Mr. Peterson again. He's such a good lawyer, you know. I've been thinking about this house and what will happen to it when I'm gone." Each time, I'd watch them stiffen, then force polite smiles. And secretly, I enjoyed it. I wasn't being cruel, Elle, not really. I was teaching them a lesson. I was showing them that I wasn't just sitting around waiting to die, while they planned what to do with my life's work. But I didn't stop there. One afternoon, I invited my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, over for tea, and I made sure my children knew she was coming. Mrs. Carter was a sweet woman, always bringing me pies and helping me with little errands. But more importantly, she was the kind of woman who talked. And I wanted my children to wonder what we were talking about. When David and Emily dropped by, unexpectedly, and saw Mrs. Carter sitting in my living room, they both froze. "Oh, hello," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Hello, dears," Mrs. Carter said warmly. "Your mother and I were just talking about her plans for the future. She has such a generous heart." I smiled sweetly and said nothing. David frowned slightly. "What kind of plans?" "Oh, just some charitable work," Mrs. Carter said cheerfully. "She's always thinking of others." I watched as David's face darkened. He didn't like that answer one bit. After they left, I sat by the window and laughed to myself. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads. But the real turning point came one Sunday afternoon. They were both in the kitchen, helping me with dishes after lunch. From that day on, they started visiting more often. At first, I thought maybe they were coming to spend time with me because they felt guilty. But then I noticed the way they looked around my house, as if taking inventory. The way they asked little questions about my finances, pretending it was just casual conversation. "Mom, do you still have that life insurance policy? Have you thought about selling the old jewelry? You never wear it. What about your savings? Are you comfortable?" I'd just smile and give vague answers, watching them squirm. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. They had taken so much from me when they laughed about my death that night. They made me feel small, invisible, unwanted. But now, I held all the cards. And I wasn't afraid to play them. I didn't plan to become this clever at my age. But when you have been betrayed by your own children, the very people you raised, fed, and protected, something inside you shifts. I stopped being the quiet, forgiving mother who swallowed her pain. I became a woman with a plan. The next phase of my little game started with a phone call. I called David one Thursday evening and said, "Sweetheart, I just wanted to let you know. I updated my will again today. Mr. Peterson was very pleased with the changes." I didn't explain what those changes were. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then David asked, trying to sound casual, Oh, what kind of changes? Oh, just some things I'd been thinking about. You'll find out one day. Good night, dear. I hung up before he could ask anything else. The next morning, Emily called me. Mom, David said you changed your will again. She asked, her voice sharp. Yes, dear, I replied calmly. I've just been thinking about the people who have truly been there for me in my old age. The ones who care. You know how it is. I could practically hear her blood pressure rising through the phone. That weekend, they both came over unannounced. Their smiles were too wide, too practiced. Mom, David said, we just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said with a serene smile. Emily jumped in quickly. You know we love you, right? We want what's best for you. I looked her straight in the eye. Do you? Because the last time I heard you talking about me, you were laughing about how long I might live. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then shut it. David looked at her, then back at me. Mom, you weren't supposed to hear that, he said quietly. I know, I said softly. But I did. And once you hear something like that, you never forget it. That night, I decided to take things a step further. I went to the old. Oh, I've been sorting through things, I said casually. It feels good to get rid of clutter. He nodded, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. What are you going to do with all of it? He asked. Oh, some of it I might donate, I replied. Some I might give to people who really need it. He didn't say anything, but I saw his jaw clench. I kept at it for weeks.com. I'd leave brochures about charities and shelters on the coffee table, where they could see them. I'd casually mention that Mrs. Carter had introduced me to a young, single mother who could really use a helping hand. I even told them I'd been thinking about selling the house and moving into a smaller place, closer to people who appreciate me. Each time, they tried to hide their panic, but I could see it, the tight smiles, the way their eyes darted to each other, and every time I saw it, I felt stronger. But my favorite moment came one Sunday dinner when I decided to really shake them. We were sitting at the table, eating in tense silence, when I said suddenly, you know, I've been thinking, I might outlive you both. Emily nearly choked on her wine. What? She asked, stunned.com. Well, I've been feeling better than ever lately. Who knows? Maybe I'll make it to 95, 100 even. And then what will you do? David tried to laugh. Mom, don't say things like that. Why not? I asked innocently. It's true. You were betting on me dying soon, weren't you? What happens if I don't? The silence that followed was delicious. I leaned back in my chair, smiled, and took a slow sip of my tea. The beauty of this game was that I no longer had to raise my voice or beg for their love. I had something better, their fear. And fear, I discovered, was a powerful motivator. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, planning every word, every little detail. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. It was a warm Sunday afternoon when I called them both over. I've made dinner, I said over the phone. My tone was so pleasant that I could almost hear them relax on the other end. They thought maybe, just maybe, I had softened. When they arrived, I greeted them with a smile. The table was set beautifully, my best china, the good silverware, flowers in the center. I had roasted a chicken, made mashed potatoes, even baked a pie. David actually said, "This feels like old times." And for a brief moment, I let them believe that. Halfway through the meal, I stood up. I have something I want to share with you both, I said quietly. I went to my desk, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it on the table. This, I said, is a copy of my new will. I saw Emily's fork freeze halfway to her mouth. David set down his glass slowly. Mom, he said carefully, you didn't have to. Oh, but I did, I interrupted, because I wanted you both to know exactly what I've done. I sat back down and looked at them, one by one. For years, I believed my duty was to leave everything to you, the house, the savings, everything your father and I worked for. I thought that was what good mothers did. But then I heard you. I heard the bets you made. I heard you laugh about how long it would take before I died. I heard you wish me gone. David opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. No, you need to listen. I realized something, sitting there that night. Listening from the hallway, I continued. I realized that I have been too forgiving, too soft, too afraid of losing you both. But that night, something changed. I stopped being afraid, and I started thinking. I slid the will toward them. You won't get the house. You won't get the savings. You won't even get the jewelry you've been fighting over since you were teenagers. Emily's face went white. Mom, you can't be serious. Oh, I am very serious, I said calmly. Instead, everything will go to the women's shelter downtown, the library fund, and to the nurse who actually visits me every week and cares enough to ask how I am doing. David slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous, he shouted. You can't just throw away everything like this. Everything. I repeated softly. No, David, I'm not throwing it away. I'm finally giving it to people who deserve it. I stood then, my voice steady, strong. You wanted me gone so badly. You were counting down the days until you could take what I built. Well, congratulations, you just lost everything. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Emily's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of anger. You can't do this to us, she cried. Oh, but I can, I replied. Because you forgot something very important. I am still alive. And as long as I'm alive, I get to choose. I gathered the plates, calmly clearing the table as they sat there stunned. When I brought out the pie, I said, almost sweetly, you know, I used to be afraid of dying. But now, I almost look forward to it, because when I go, I know you won't get a single penny. And maybe, just maybe, you'll spend the rest of your lives wondering if it was worth it. That was the last family dinner we ever had. After that night, they came around less and less, until they stopped coming at all. And you know what? I didn't miss them. I filled my days with better people, people who valued me for who I am, not for what I could leave behind. For the first time in years, I felt free. And when I lay in bed at night, I don't think about death anymore. I think about how I took back control of my life. I think about how, in the end,